my name is Emma O'Neill-Sandham and I am so honoured and so excited to be a 2021 Western Sydney Emerging Writers Fellow. Last year, I graduated from Macquarie University's Master of Creative Writing program and have had pieces published in Anico Press, The Lifted Brow and Going Down Swinging. That all sounds very neat, so I want to preface that little summary by saying that there is a lot of rejection smouldering behind all of those publications. And I just wanted to, before we start our workshop, give a big shout out to all the budding writers that might be watching this, who are finding slithers of time before uni and after work to keep writing. It can be really, really hard, and you might think that no one's reading your words, but there is a whole community of writers like me who are willing you on to get words on a page and to keep going. So I wanted to just give you guys a big shout out first. So today my workshop is about biography. So before you start groaning and stop the video, I want to be the first to admit that the biography section of the bookshop is not the first that I go to. Ghostwritten summaries of a public figure's life don't really get me excited. But what does get me excited about biography are the ideas around how one defines and captures a life, and what role writing and biography can play in this process. More recently, it seems biography has been released from the strongholds of the rich and famous, and in a way into the hands of the people, with many more now sitting down with loved ones to talk about and capture their lives in the form of biography. In fact, during COVID, people seemed to be even more interested in doing this, or maybe they were just looking for something to do. But either way, biography became a lot more popular. So during that time, according to an ABC report, Western Australia's State Records Office experienced twice as much traffic, and Ancestry.com, the famous family history website, noted a 37% increase in new subscriptions. So definitely becoming more popular. Now, the topic of biography is a huge one. So today in this 30-minute workshop, I'm going to focus on 4 elements. The first being, what is biography and why are we compelled to write about our lives? The second being issues faced when writing biography. How accurate are they and does it matter? The third being why write biography. And this section will include a look at a really fascinating area of life writing that's occurring at end of life and the kind of context of that. And the fourth and final section are tips on how to approach writing biography. So for the final section, I'll be drawing on some expert advice and tips, but also drawing from my own personal experience of creating a few mini biographies and legacy documents for family and friends. And I hope this workshop might inspire you to do the same and sit down with a family member or friend and ask them about their lives. So essentially this workshop, the first half will be more theoretical and the second half will be more practical. So diving into the theory first, what is biography and why are we compelled to write about our lives? A biography is essentially a detailed description of a person's life. However, as Paul Brooks notes, referenced by Maria Tumarkin in her Griffith Review piece, it can be something more, something that holds ourselves together. He writes, "We are built from language and memory, and ourself, as something unified and continuous with the past, present and future, has a narrative structure. The thing holding ourselves together is, in other words, stories." So how do we hold ourselves together with stories, with words, in the form of biography? And which are the stories that hold us together? As Annie Dillard famously wrote in The Writing Life, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing. Despite this, biographies are very rarely, if ever, written in a way that captures what we do with our hours. In fact, as Banner notes, no sophisticated biographer any longer reduces a life to a few categories or merely chronicles day-to-day experiences, glossing over historical, literary, and geographical contexts. So beyond merely a detailed description of a person's life, biography might be better framed within the following description proposed by Banner. At its best, biography, like history, is based on archival research, interweaves historical categories and methodologies, reflects current political and theoretical concerns, and raises complex issues of truth and proof. It challenges the analyst to move beyond easy platitudes to engage what Clifford Geertz famously called thick description. I think Geertz's thick description is an interesting frame for biography in terms of how a life might be viewed, especially when you consider Denzin's extended definition of thick description. A thick description does more than record what a person is doing. It goes beyond mere fact and surface appearances. It presents detail, context, emotion, and the webs of social relationships that join persons to one another. Thick description evokes emotionality and self-feeling. It inserts history into experience. It establishes the significance of an experience or the sequence of events for the person or persons in question. In thick description, the voices, feelings, actions, and meanings of interacting individuals are heard. What makes this interesting, I think, in terms of framing biography is how do you then capture something so multifaceted and complex as a life in a static, linear document like the biography? And this brings me to the next section of this workshop, which is the issues faced when writing biography. How accurate are they, and does it even matter? So I'm going to start with a great quote from James McConkie, who notes in The Anatomy of Memory, why write memoir? Why not call it fiction and be done with all the hashing about, wondering where memory stops and imagination begins? And if memoir seeks to talk about the big issues, about history and peace, death and love, why not leave these reflections to those with expert and scholarly knowledge? Why let the common or garden variety memorist into the club? My answer, of course, is a memorist's answer. Memoir must be written because each of us must have a created vision of the past. Created, that is, real, tangible, made of the stuff of the life lived in place and in history. So from this understanding, each biography presents a unique version of the past. And how is this version of the past extracted? Primarily through memory, which in itself is fraught. For example, this is a photo of me when I was about 12 years old with my dad and our family dog. This was a stray who slept on our doorstep and lived with us as we searched for his owner. I have really vivid memories of our dog. I remember seeing him from the school bus, Dad waiting at the bus stop with him on a lead, excitedly running up to the dog for a big cuddle. I remember seeing Mum, who was afraid of dogs, out in the backyard in the mornings patting him. I remember dog food in our house. I remember thinking, yep, we are now a family with a dog. And I remember feeling really sad when one morning our dog was gone again. For me, the dog made a huge impact and was with our family for a long time. But not everyone in my family remembers this the same way. My mum reckons the dog was with us for only about 5 weeks, my brother about 2 months. I'm convinced it was at least 6 months. Now, the issue with this is that there's no way to fact check it. It was the early 90s, before iPhones and the internet and any digital timestamps. So how, if someone was writing my biography, would they deal with this, knowing that there is a chance that my memory of our dog's time with our family isn't accurate? Do they leave it out, or do they put it in? It seems theories of biography have evolved to a point that supports the latter. According to Max Bledstein, who surveyed over 100 years of biography theory to chart shifting critical perceptions, theorists of biography have gone from being gatekeepers of truth, intent on pursuing historical fidelity, to postmodernists who interrogate the possibility of such a notion. Patricia Hampel explores the connection of memory with biography further when she notes, no memorist writes for long without experiencing an unsettling disbelief about the reliability of memory, a hunch that memory is not, after all, just memory. I'm forced to admit that memoir is not a matter of transcription, that memory itself is not a warehouse of finished stories, not a static gallery of framed pictures. I must admit that I invented. Further complicating things beyond the non-linear, multifaceted nature of memory is the evolving idea of self, as noted by biographers practicing new biography. According to Banner, biographers practicing the new biography stress the shifting and multifaceted nature of individual personality. In an impressive essay on the new biography, Jo Margadant argues that there is no such thing as a coherent self, no united I. The only cells that exist, according to Margadant, are those that individuals perform to create an impression of coherence. So, considering the fallibility of memory, the complexity of capturing the idea of self, of a life, within a structured narrative arc, and in consideration of Gert's thick description, why write biography? Why attempt it? And why, in the past few decades, has it become more and more popular for biography to be attempted by, in the words of McConkie, common or garden variety memorists? Non-writers interviewing people and creating legacy documents, especially for those approaching end of life. Who benefits? Is it the memorist? A person desperate for something tangible, proof that a person, a loved one, was here, that they made an impact, that they lived a life. Words on a page to read and reread and flick through and hold after a person is gone. Or does the person being written about, reflecting on their life, benefit too? According to a new area of practice taking place right here in Western Sydney, where I am filming from, they do. I'm now going to play you a short snippet of an interview I had the honour of conducting recently with Caroline Wilkinson. Caroline is the volunteer coordinator for supportive and palliative care at the Nepean Blue Mountains Local Health District. She leads a volunteer program that provides companionship and support to people living with life-limiting illness. 3 years ago, as part of this program, they introduced a biography service. This offers a personal way for someone at end of life to reflect upon their journey and share their story. Here's Caroline talking about the impact that this service can have. At end of life, you obviously are very passionate about the whole program. What is it that kind of makes you passionate, and what impacts have you seen it have on people?
Look, I'm passionate because we have I think a lot of people would agree, we have really quite a medicalised model of end of life. And obviously, you know, the two big things in palliative care are symptom control and quality of life. That's sort of what makes for, a journey to end of life that's meaningful and is comfortable for the client and the family. So for me, it's about quality of life. That's what the volunteers certainly bring, and the way that they can help people fulfill their goal at the end of life. So the difference that we've seen, and look, it's more about the process, really. Often people get a bit caught up in the book at the end, and there's no doubt that that's something that's really precious and meaningful, but it's actually about the process. So, you know, many people say to us, you know, never before have I had someone, you know, who's come over a period of time and just listened to my story and honoured my story and, you know, helped me see the things that I have done that I'm proud of, the things that I have learned along the way, even if there may be things I'm not so proud of, you know, and really kind of at this precious time helped me make sense of what my life has been. So we had a woman not long ago in the Hawkesbury, very independent. She'd been an only child, really super achiever. She was only in her early 60s, really struggling, I guess, with what she'd done, and, very, in some ways difficult to connect with, and we even had that sense for herself as well. But you could really feel the deep pain and the distress at, what was happening to her, and that it was all going to be over. And so she did agree to work with a biography volunteer. It's a very practical focus. It's not talking about the dying necessarily. It's, something, because she was very passionate about a lot of things, wanted to kind of share those. which she was able to do. There's no doubt a lot of wisdom about setting up a community, little library and things like that. But, with a very good biographer that I think you're also going to meet, it did get deeper and deeper. And apparently at one time she just looked at this, thing that had come out of this, and she went, I have really lived a full life, haven't I? And then she cried.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And that's what our experience is, that it's always meant to be life-giving. For some people, it's not going to be the right thing. There's too much trauma in their life. What's happening is too difficult. But for those for whom, it's going to be a life-giving thing, we're really glad to be able to give them that quality of life experience.
It was so fantastic to talk to Caroline. I found this life writing model a really fascinating area of research and development within the genre of biography, as it not only speaks to our desire to tell stories, to capture a life on paper, but also the benefit of the process beyond simply creating a legacy document for the grieving. I also had the privilege to speak to one of the volunteers of this program who talked so passionately about the process and the honour of being let into someone's life at such an important time. She also emphasised that in this form of biography, the process of listening is more important than the book being created at the end, which is a really interesting evolution of where biography is at in terms of the process being at the forefront of the biography writing. There is also another related area of research called dignity therapy, and this area of research is led by Dr. Harvey Chichinov. This combines life writing with psychological therapies. A study on dignity therapy from the Journal of Clinical Oncology found that therapy reduced depressive symptoms and heightened senses of dignity, purpose, and meaning. So again, this brings an interesting perspective to the study of biography, shifting the priority away from the end result and towards the process of engaging someone to talk about their life. This brings me to the final section of this workshop, and which will include a few tips on how to actually practically sit down and write a biography with a family member or friend. So now that we've addressed some of the theoretical frameworks around biography and addressed some new areas of study related to the genre, we now come to some practical questions of how to go about actually interviewing someone about their life, what to consider, how to approach it, and where to start. How do you go beyond simply documenting various categories of someone's life to capturing thick descriptions that present detail, context, and emotion? The first thing I'd like to consider are the 4 principles of interviewing. These are actually from Columbia University's famous journalism program, but I thought we could consider them in the context of writing biography. The first principle is establish a relationship with the source conducive to obtaining information. That's a formal way of saying make them feel comfortable. Ensure that the person you are interviewing wants to be interviewed, understands what is going on, and is confident that they will be in control of the process. That is, that they will see the final version, that they'll be able to edit it, and that it is their story that you are simply facilitating to get on the page. If you plan on recording the interview, I would also, which I recommend you do, ensure that they know you are recording it and that they're comfortable with that. Respect that they might not want to talk about some things. It's not a journalistic type 7:30 report interview with the Prime Minister where you're wanting to crack them open. There are some things that might be too traumatizing to delve into, and that's absolutely fine in this context. And think about what would make the person you're interviewing most comfortable. So even simple things like what time of day would they like to chat? How long the session could be. You might find that you break it up over a few days, or they might be more comfortable sitting down in one session. Really work with them to make them comfortable with the process, because when they're comfortable with the process, that's when you can actually have a really engaging experience with interviewing them. The second point is prepare carefully. Familiarize yourself with as much background as possible. So the first point related to this is having a list of prompts and questions. And we're going to loop back to these prompts in a minute. But these prompts are really thoughtful questions, possibly some photos that you can ask them to bring along, or some music as well. And these are all prompts that will really help them spark memories that you can talk about. Secondly, you can research things that you think might be relevant. For example, there might be major historic events that took place in their lifetime, or some background information about their hometown that you could introduce that might spark a certain memory. The third principle is ask questions that are relevant to the source and that induce the source to talk. Again, we'll go more about the types of questions that you can ask a little later, but essentially it's just thinking about how you ask your question. For example, instead of asking simply, what school did you go to? Think about what experiences that person might have had at school. For example, you could ask things like, did you have a particular teacher that inspired you? What did you eat for lunch at school most days? Did you ever fall over in the playground? It's amazing what specific questions can inspire. And the fourth is listen and watch attentively. In the context of writing biography and sitting down with someone to talk about their life, this is probably the most important one of all. To really listen and to watch for areas or topics that seem to get the interviewee excited. So for some, their career might be something that nourished them and influenced who they are and how they lived. For others, a career could have been the thing that just simply funded a really rich family and home life that they cherished above everything else. So while it's important to have questions and prompts ready, it's also important to allow the interviewee to direct questions at things, to allow the interviewee to direct the interview, towards things that they feel are important. Remember that they are in control and you are simply trying to help them remember. In terms of in terms of listening and watching, allow for pauses and silences and timeouts. If you feel that they're getting a little bit tired, time out for a cup of tea or a walk or anything that might get them comfortable. And finally, take notes of things that they may have said and ask follow-up questions. For example, if they mentioned they had a paper route on a Saturday morning, you could ask things like, how did you get the job? Or was it cold during the winter? What did you spend your paper route money on? So these principles are really about, first of all, making the interviewee feel really comfortable. And that is the first step in a conducive and really fruitful interview experience. The second is having really great prompts. So I'm going to loop back now to the three main prompts that you can use. So the first prompt is questions. So it's important to prepare a list of questions that act as a guide for the interview. Share these questions with your interviewee if they request them. And in fact, I would recommend that you do send them ahead of time. Again, this isn't a journalistic type interview where you're wanting to get them on the spot. You're wanting them to feel really comfortable and as comfortable as you are when you do meet to have the interview. So there's numerous resources online with exhaustive lists of questions, and I'll include a few links to these at the information connected to this video. But as a starting point, it's a good idea to have questions that cover a few basic main sections, which would be early life, growing up, career and work, family life, and general interests and hobbies. Of course, as we mentioned previously, don't feel that you have to stick to the chronological order. Be prepared to let the interview go to a place that the interviewee wants it to go. So you might spend a whole lot of time on career and not so much on family life, or vice versa. I'm going to go now quickly to a fantastic resource that has the top 10 tips for interviewing someone for a biography. This resource is from StoryCorp. It's an American nonprofit organization whose mission is to record, preserve, and share the stories of Americans from all backgrounds and beliefs. It's a fantastic website and it has some fantastic resources. And it also has some great examples of stories shared and told really brilliantly. So I definitely recommend that you check it out. So we've gone through a few of these tips already, but I just want to draw your attention to a couple more that are listed on this sheet. The first is asking warm-up questions. Again, even though we talked about that kind of having those questions prepared, having some warm-up questions, don't go in there with kind of really hard questions. Really basic ones are a really good way to kind of start things off. Asking open-ended questions is really important too. Avoiding questions that can simply be answered with a yes or a no. And using language, as it says here, like tell me about or what was it like. It inspires them to talk in more detail about the memory that you're asking them to talk about. And the other one I really wanted to emphasize on this list is encouraging vivid detail. Now, this is something that can be hard to do because sometimes someone might say, if you said to them, oh, what was your house, what was it like? What was your house like growing up? Oh, they might say, yeah, it was really nice. And so you really have to dig deeper to encourage that vivid detail. And how you do that is, as we previously noted, asking those specific questions. Asking them about things like, at Christmas, who did the cooking, and evoking smells and tastes and different memories that might provide you and them the opportunity to kind of share really vivid experiences of their life. So the second prompt are photos. Photos are a really great way to tap into a particular memory. Some photos, as we mentioned earlier, may evoke a really sensory memory like smell and taste. If you take, for example, a photo of a Christmas lunch, it could really quite rapidly help someone remember a really vivid memory of how the turkey tasted or different favourite foods and things like that. Some photos may reveal things slowly, as this exercise suggests. So this is an exercise from Handling the Truth, and it talks about studying the background of a chosen photo, which I found really interesting. So not just what's in the foreground, but as it says here, what lies beyond the chosen subject, just to the right or just to the left. What does the startle of the once unnoticed detail suggest to you? What would happen if this small thing, and not the obvious thing, the central thing, the thing easily seized and snatched, was the start of your story? And I think it's a really beautiful idea that really connects strongly to biography, that sometimes it can be the small detail or the thing that you might not think is that important is actually the thing that is super important to that person and their story. So in terms of looking at photos, definitely look at who's in the photo, but look into the background and see if there's any details in the photo that you could kind of ask about. A person that, they haven't talked about, or a photo or a picture on the wall in the lounge room, or various things that are found in that photo. So it could actually lead to some really interesting conversations. And the third prompt is music. Playing someone's favourite song or film clip or band can evoke really vivid memories and act as an effective prompt. In fact, music is so connected to memory. Recent studies have shown that music has been identified as important in the construction of autobiographical memories, and thus for making judgments about oneself and others. So quite fitting in terms of biography. Furthering this, music is being widely explored in the context of memory and Alzheimer's research. The neurologist Oliver Sacks says the past, which is not recoverable in any other way, is embedded as if in amber in the music, and people can regain a sense of identity. So obviously this Alzheimer's related research isn't connected directly to biography, but I share it simply to reiterate the deep connection between memory and music and what it might inspire during an interview. So now we've addressed some of the theoretical frameworks around biography, addressed some new areas of study related to the genre, and addressed some of the practical considerations of conducting an interview. The only thing we haven't really covered is how you present your work, and that bit is really up to you. There are heaps of tools out there that can help you combine images and texts and music and whatever you've gathered and consider important in telling your interviewee's story. And I'll include a few links to some of these in the information connected to this video. I would also advise that when you're putting it together that you consider a non-linear presentation. For example, instead of starting with early life, consider your content. Consider if there is a theme. Are there critical points in their story that should be given more emphasis? So that's it. Of course, we've only covered a really small segment of what is a huge and fascinating genre. I hope this has inspired you to possibly sit down with a family member or friend and ask them about their life, or at the very least, to think about why we tell our stories. As I mentioned in the description section of this video, you'll see a list of readings, materials and tools that I've referenced. So I hope this helps you on your writing journey. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to WestWords for supporting me in presenting my very first workshop. Thanks again, thanks for listening, and yeah, good luck. Keep writing.